All right, we've got a couple more people joining. So just as everyone joins, a couple of things before we get started. So Kristen is going to be leading the session today, but I did want to just welcome you all to this space. If this is the first time that you have attended one of our events before, I'm so happy to have you. Really grateful to see your face today. We have a couple more events coming up that I will kind of just let you know about in case you're interested. We do have our next, our February workshop lined up, which is going to be, I think I hear somebody. Yeah, which is going to be in February, is going to be led by May K. Sang on sustainable visibility. So thinking about how we can be showing up as the face of our business, but doing it in a way that's actually sustainable for us and safe, depending on your identities. So that's going to be in February. So keep an eye out for that. Also on Friday, we are going to be doing our next co-working. So if you want to come and co-work with me on Friday, it's usually a small group. It's just silent 90 minutes silent co-working time. So anything you've been avoiding, if you would like to set that time aside to join us, then you are welcome to do so. Okay, so I'm going to pass things off to Kristen momentarily. What time on Friday? Good point. I can't remember anything. So let me check Emmy because I'm going to tell you the wrong time. Noon Pacific, 12 to 1:30 Pacific. Yes, thank you, Patricia. Yeah, so you can join us then. Okay, so Kristen's going to be leading this session today, and a couple of things before we get into it. There's going to be a moment during this session where there's going to be time to share some things. I'm going to pause the recording during that time so that nobody's personal shares are being recorded. I would also just like to reiterate that during that time, really any time that we pause the recording in any of these events, but to say it at the top here, everything that's shared is confidential. So please just remember that unless you're sharing about your own experience in this space, anything that is shared is not to leave the space. If during maybe like a question and answer period or anything like that, or some other time during our session today, you wanted to share anything else or ask a personal question outside of that space, I am more than happy to always pause recording. So just know that you can always ask for me to pause the recording and we will do so. Does anyone have any other questions before I pass things off to Kristen? Okay. Let me make sure that I have transcripts on. And Kristen, you can go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. My heart is racing right now, in part because I'm a little bit nervous, so I'll name that, but also in part because I just see so many faces of people from various points across my life and new faces. And just thank you all so much for being here. Supporting each other is just like the way we show up for each other. I just thank you so much. And I hope that through our time together, you get something out of this and can walk away with at least something that you can apply, some self-compassion practice in an hour and a half from now when I'm not around. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I am super not tech savvy. So there we go, named it, bear with me. Let's see. I'm a good therapist. I'm a less good tech person. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Awesome, great. And I think everybody can hear me. Yeah, okay, good. So we're gonna start with what's called a soft landing. And this is something that we do in self-compassion practice whenever we're entering a space. So I'm going to guide us through that, and you're welcome to keep your camera on or turn your camera off. You're welcome to do that throughout any of this time together today. I want you to always prioritize taking care of yourself. That's the number one most important thing. It's sort of the entire purpose of self-compassion tools and practices. So please bear that in mind. But we're going to start with the soft landing. So I'm going to invite you to just take a moment to get comfortable. And closing the eyes or softening the gaze. If closing the eyes is not comfortable for you, you might just lower your gaze a bit. And taking a few deep breaths. Perhaps noticing the sounds around you. Taking a moment to notice yourself, to maybe locate yourself in your room, in the room that you're in. And to greet yourself with an inner smile. To welcome yourself the way you might welcome a friend into your home. And slowly expanding your awareness to your whole body. Noticing any pleasant sensations. Noticing any discomfort. And if discomfort is present, taking a moment to remind yourself that discomfort is part of the human experience. Everyone experiences discomfort. You are not alone. And if you're noticing discomfort, maybe even placing a hand gently wherever you notice that discomfort. Taking another few deeper than usual breaths. Extending the exhale. And in your own time, gently blinking your eyes to open. Thank you all so much for joining me in that. Hopefully we're all just a tiny bit more present and a tiny bit more settled here together. And I can welcome you again. Brooke, I want to start just by thanking you for creating this space and for staying committed to the work that you do in the world. I can feel tears coming up. We need what you do. And I'm so deeply appreciative for your wisdom and your guidance and your honesty and your vulnerability. So thank you. Thank you for continuing to hold space.
Thank you, Kristen. Really happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to take just a couple minutes to tell you all a bit about myself because I know many of you and I don't know many of you. So few of my identities to start. My name is Kristen Genzano. I'm a white cisgendered female. I'm straight. I'm neurodivergent. I come from a lower middle class family. I'm child free by choice, and I have a master's level education. I've been a licensed professional counselor for over a decade. And before that, I was in the business world. I worked for a few professional sports teams, professional basketball teams to be specific, on the business development and strategy side of things. I left. It was fun. Like, I'm not going to lie, it was fun. There was a lot of partying that happened. There was a lot of playfulness that happened. But I ended up leaving that environment because at the end of the day, I felt pretty empty and unfulfilled. So in 2011, I started graduate school to become a therapist. where I was trained in mindfulness and behavior therapies. Then in 2016, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I started my own small business as a group practice owner. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. And in 2017, I took my first mindful self-compassion course, and it changed my life. It really changed my life. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. The reason it changed my life is it's really twofold. So as things often work out unintentionally, 2 months after I took the course, my dad died unexpectedly. And for those of you who have experienced loss, you may know that grief is one of the most difficult experiences to navigate. And I think that had I not had the tools I gained from my self-compassion class, I would have been a lot harder on myself over the two plus years following my dad's death. So it turns out that that class came at just the right time, and it supported me in ways I couldn't have even imagined. But even without that experience, self-compassion has changed my life because I'm someone who struggles with perfectionism, and there's someone in this group here who's known me since high school, and they can definitely vouch for that. I've struggled with perfectionism and overachieving. And what I mean when I say overachieving is really just this drive to do more and more and more, and that nothing that I ever do felt really good enough. Until I took my mindful self-compassion course in 2017, I had no idea just how harshly I was treating myself. It really didn't. Like, this was just my standard. What I'm going to refer to mindful self-compassion as MSC because it's just obviously a lot easier to say. So what MSC helped me understand is why I have a tendency to be so hard on myself. And most importantly, it taught me how to support myself whenever I am able to catch myself being hard on myself. So because that course was so powerful for me, I decided I wanted to train as a teacher. And in 2019, I completed my training. And over the past 5 years, I've taught a number of workshops, several courses, and some classes. And so here I am doing one more of those. So really happy to have the opportunity to talk to this group in particular, because there's so much I can personally relate to as a business owner. I know that struggle. So with all of that, we're going to stop talking about me, and we're going to start talking about self-compassion and how to be kind to ourselves. So I'm going to assume that most of us that are here had a former life where we worked for somebody else. And I'm also going to assume that most of us left that former life because something was off. Maybe we didn't like the way we were treated. Maybe we felt like the work was all consuming. Maybe it was unfulfilling, or, a number of other possibilities. And Brooke and I have talked a lot about how we often carry the same behaviors or the same habits from those like maybe toxic workplaces or just unfulfilling workplaces into our places that we've created for ourselves as self-employed people. So in other words, like as an example, one of the reasons I wanted to work for myself was so that I could be in control of my own time. And then as I started to bring on employees at my practice, I found myself back in an old pattern of being available to everyone all the time. So here I was starting a business to get away from this thing and then creating the same thing in the business. And what I've had to do around that specific example is notice the pattern. And then with the support of my incredible therapist, look at why that pattern exists. Why was I falling back into this pattern? And then the hardest part, in my opinion, be kind to myself when that pattern shows up again, whenever I'm struggling with that same issue. And again, that's where self-compassion comes in. So here's our agenda for today. We've already moved through the welcome and introduction. With the rest of our time, I'm going to guide you through some applied practices, and we're going to talk a bit about the research and science of self-compassion, and then we'll have some time for discussion and questions at the end. So I'm not a good multitasker, so feel free to drop questions in the chat, but I probably won't see them. I'm not ignoring you. And hopefully Brooke is going to keep an eye on that for me and let me know if anybody has a question that needs addressing right away. Okay. Excuse me. So as we spend the next hour or so together, it's really important to bear in mind that one of the most important elements of self-compassion is spaciousness. So we have this agenda, but we're probably not going to get through everything because I want to make sure you all have time and space to reflect on your own experiences and to share with one another if that feels right to you. So can everybody please make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen handy? We're going to actually jump right into one of those exercises now. Give everybody just a moment to grab something. Okay. I want to invite you to think about a time when you had a close friend who was struggling in some way. Maybe they had some kind of misfortune, maybe they failed at something, maybe they were feeling inadequate about something. And I want you to take a minute or two to just jot down that scenario. I'm really inviting you to make it a specific single situation, not a generality. And the more specific you can be, the better. So go ahead and take a minute to do that. And once you've got that situation, a few notes about that situation written down, I want you to think about how you treated that friend. What did you say to them? If you remember what you said, write down exactly what you said. What tone did you use? If you can remember, how is your posture towards them? Were you leaning in? Were you leaning out? Were there nonverbal gestures? Go ahead and jot down what you can remember about that. Take another 30 seconds or so and finish that part up. And I think Abby just joined us. Abby, welcome. Abby, we're in the middle of an exercise, just writing down a time when a friend was struggling with something and how we responded to them. So if you want to take a minute or two and jump right in, feel free. Okay, so now I'm going to invite you to think of a specific time when you were struggling in some way. So again, the same kind of idea. Maybe you had some misfortune, you failed at something, you were feeling inadequate about something. And again, try to make it a specific time, not just like, oh, all of last week, right? But just something specific.
How did you know that I wrote last week?
Oh, it's relatable, Brooke, that's all. And then when you have a few things just to keep that situation present, I'm going to invite you to think about how you responded to yourself in that situation. What did you say? Can you remember specific ways that you spoke to yourself, specific thoughts you had about yourself? What tone did you use? What was your posture as you were dealing with this? And were there any nonverbal gestures that you made? Taking another 30 seconds or so here to wrap up your thoughts. Okay, so now for the fun part. Brooke, I'm going to ask if you can put everybody into pairs, and the invitation, and this is truly an invitation, because again, we're going to go back to the comment I made earlier. Please always prioritize taking care of yourself. The invitation is to share with your partner what you noticed. And this doesn't mean that you share, here's the thing that happened to me that was so distressing. It means rather you might share something like, wow, I noticed that to my friend, I gave her a hug. And to me, toward myself, I started telling myself how inadequate I was, right? So you're just sharing what you notice, similarities and differences about how you treated yourself versus how you treated your friend. And we're going to have this breakout for about 5 minutes. So just kind of be mindful of time so that each person gets a chance to share and each person gets a chance to listen. Any questions before we move? Oh, go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, no, I was just going to say there's going to be 2 to 3 people just because of the number of people that we have. And I know that some folks are off camera and maybe have started doing other things. So if you end up in a room where people are not there, not actually there, feel free to either leave that breakout room and come back, or raise your hand and ask for help in that breakout room, and we'll make sure that you're taken care of.
Great. Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah. Okay. And we have one person who looking at who ended up in a room and who's still here and just moving people.
Okay.
So that there's actually people in.
Awesome. Thank you for handling that. I feel like that's such a new skill for presenting, like managing breakout rooms. But most people are paired with somebody.
Everyone's paired with somebody now, except for who we have here.
Okay, awesome. Researcher here. Thanks, Brooke.
I forgot. Thank you, Patricia.
No, that's great. Thank you. Preliminary data by Dr. Kristen, who's the leading self-compassion researcher here in the US, suggests that 78% of people in the United States are more compassionate toward themselves than they are towards others. Excuse me, are more compassionate towards others than they are towards themselves. Whereas only 6% are more compassionate towards themselves than they are towards others. And about 16% are equal. And in the self-compassion community, there's like kind of a nerdy joke that, well, those 16% probably took mindful self-compassion, but there's no data to support that. That's just a little nerdy joke. Anyway, we're going to explore self-compassion in more detail. So let's jump into this definition. So again, Dr. Kristen Neff identified 3 components of self-compassion, and these are the things that you all were already hitting on with your shares. These 3 are mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one. So mindfulness is something you guys are all probably have at least heard the term. You probably have some level of familiarity with what mindfulness is. But when we're talking about self-compassion, we're talking about noticing, being aware that suffering exists without over-identification. Over-identification means like merging with it. So for example, if I'm experiencing sadness, mindfulness would be the ability to observe that sadness is here without being fully engulfed in the sadness to the extent that I don't even recognize that that's happening. The reason this is important is because we first have to be aware that suffering is taking place in order to do anything to respond to it. If we're so immersed in it, we're maybe not even aware that it's happening. In addition, the invitation is to be with difficult feelings without trying to change, avoid, or fix them. And sometimes when we're so immersed in them, there isn't space to just hold them, to just be with them. It's sort of like immersion and then gotta quick get to something to escape the feeling, to fix it, or to change it. So I think an example of mindfulness is, this is something I can personally relate to. Maybe you've been working like really hard at a marketing campaign and it has yielded 0 results. And understandably, you feel disappointed. maybe scared about the future of your business, the first step, according to self-compassion, is to notice the experience, notice the emotions, notice that suffering is present, and if possible, name those feelings. So notice that, oh, I'm feeling disappointed, and then giving a name to it, disappointment. The next step is self-kindness, and this is in contrast to self-judgment. This is potentially what a lot of you just explored in that last exercise. What self-kindness is treating ourselves the same, with the same care and generosity as we would give to a good friend, rather than being self-critical or self-judgmental. So if we use that marketing example again, like maybe we would notice the failure of the marketing campaign, or that it hasn't gotten any results. And like, what I would do is start to criticize myself. I would say things to myself like, I'm terrible at marketing. I shouldn't even run a business. What do I think I'm doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Nothing I ever do works, right? So we start to criticize ourselves rather than turning to ourselves with kindness. So self-compassion invites, okay, first awareness of the emotion, and then kindness towards yourself because the emotion is present. I'm going to pause there and just see if anybody has any questions about those two pieces so far. Okay, good. So the third sort of leg of the stool, I guess, is common humanity. And this is in contrast to isolation. So with common humanity, we see our inadequacies, our failures, our imperfections as part of the larger human experience. We recognize that everybody struggles, that to struggle and to be human are one and one, they're the same. And we recognize that we don't have to be perfect, which is linked to self-criticism, and that we can hold ourselves to the same standards that we hold for others, that we don't have to hold ourselves in a higher standard. So continuing with that example, like, okay, so I've noticed my disappointment at the failed marketing campaign. I've named it and I've offered myself kindness. And then here with common humanity, I might say something to myself like, gosh, there's probably a lot of marketing campaigns that have failed. And I imagine the people who have experienced that have also felt disappointment and sadness and fear. And when we recognize that we're not alone in those experiences, what happens is we actually are able to release the shame that gets activated when we're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the failure. There's something wrong with me. I shouldn't own a business. I shouldn't do this, right? So common humanity really is the piece that helps, like the medicine that soothes isolation and rumination, which are the things that keep us stuck and feeling powerless and shame and unlovable and so on. Okay, questions about that so far? Okay, so together, these are the three things that, according to Dr. Kristen Neff, make up self-compassion. And so a question that usually comes up here is, okay, great, I have this definition. Now, how do I practice self-compassion? What does it look like? What does it feel like? I get that I treat myself differently than I treat a friend, but how do I even give myself what I need? So there are typically two ways that self-compassion can kind of take shape. And most of the time people think about, so it's tender self-compassion and fierce self-compassion. And most of the time people think of self-compassion and they think tender, they think nurturing, they think softness. And this is absolutely a way that self-compassion takes shape. It's comforting to support your emotional needs. It's soothing to support to downregulate your nervous system and to help you feel physically calmer and more relaxed. It's validating to express to yourself a deeper understanding and acceptance of your experience, whatever that experience is. The other side of compassion is strong and even sometimes even fierce. And this looks like protecting yourself from harm. So upholding boundaries, knowing when to take a break. I think this is a really interesting way to experience fierce self-compassion, like recognizing you've been, working on something for 2 hours and recognizing, oh, you know what, I actually need to stretch. Like that's fierce self-compassion. That's awareness of what you need and then taking that space for yourself. It could be saying no to unwanted attention or standing up for what you believe in. Fierce self-compassion also looks like just providing, so giving ourselves what we need. And it also can look like motivating. This is motivating towards short-term goals, towards long-term goals. But the key is that it's motivating with love and kindness, encouragement, rather than with fear and criticism and judgment. So we really, truly need both this tender side of compassion and the fierce side of compassion. But most of the time, we have one of those sides that's more developed than the other. So I want to invite you again to just take a moment to reflect to yourself. We're not going to share this, but just a moment to reflect on which side of self-compassion is a little bit more established for you and which side has some room for growth. And the key as you're reflecting is really, please don't criticize yourself for the side that's lacking. Like that is not compassionate. So just notice and recognize that there's room for growth there. So just take a minute or two to think on that. Does anyone have any questions about tender self-compassion, fierce self-compassion, or anything else I've covered so far?
I don't have a question, but I put it in the chat. This to me looks like inner father and inner mother.
Mm-hmm.
So the tender self-compassion to me is the inner mother, and the fierce self-compassion and the protector is the inner father. Is one is like, oh, sweetheart, I'm going to take care of you. And the other one is like, don't fuck with me.
Yes. Yeah, you got it, Sophia. That's right. There's that nurturing and then that protective. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how interesting that both are self-compassion, both are compassion, right? Yeah.
I find it hard, the fierce self-compassion side of it, like that's the side that can very easily tip over into perfectionism. Like motivating, protective, like, and part of that I think is like operating in capitalism, where we're like taught to feel like we are constantly not enough and don't have enough. But I think the fierce self-compassion part is like where it's easy to like turn the dial up a little bit too high and then you're in perfectionistic territory.
Yeah, I really appreciate that observation, Amanda. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really, again, a really astute observation. And I think that the invitation, right? The invitation here is that there's the balance. We're aiming towards a balance with the two. And so when you have that mindful awareness that, oh, I'm tipping into like perfectionism or overdrive here, there can be a number of reasons why one side is more developed than the other. You named capitalism. It can be our family of origin. It can be a lot of layered reasons. But when I've noticed that, oh, I'm tipping into this space, can I bring in the comforting, the soothing, the validating side and invite myself to pull back if that's what's needed for me right now in this moment. It is a skill that requires a ton of practice. Like I'm saying it as if, oh, just notice you're over here and then give yourself this and then voila. But that I'm not suggesting that, but it's, you are already there with that mindful awareness that that can happen. And then the next step is that self-kindness and that soothing, which we're going to talk more about in just a minute. Any other questions, comments, shares? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about our response systems. So Paul Gilbert is a clinical practitioner and he created compassion-focused therapy. And he identified that we have 3 types of emotion regulation systems. These are what you can see here on the screen. We've got the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system. And as you can see, each system serves a different function. They have a specific function. And each system is essential to our survival. Ideally, we want there to be a balance between each of these 3 systems. However, the system we most often neglect is the soothing system. And I think this goes to exactly what you were just sharing, Amanda. So because most of us have an underdeveloped soothing system, and there can be a number of reasons of why this has happened, but because most of us have this underdeveloped soothing system, we end up ping-ponging back and forth between the threat and the drive systems. And Brooke, I know you talk a lot about this, not in this language, but this kind of like trying to get out of discomfort by doing all the things. That's basically what this is illustrating. The failure, right? Or the failure, such as with the marketing campaign, right? So there's a failure, it leads to self-criticism. And then to escape that self-criticism, I'm just going to strive and do more and pursue more and try to accomplish more. But what's really needed is that soothing system. So what's, I think, super interesting about this model is that the threat does not have to be a physical threat. The threat system was originally part of our survival system because, you know, probably many of you have heard that phrase, like there's no like tiger in the room, right? Like the threat system was developed to keep us alive. But what has happened over time is that the threats that we perceive are not threats to our livelihood, to our existence, but they're threats in some other way, like threats to our perceived ability to survive, threats to our lovability. So this could be in the form of self-criticism. You might perceive a threat in terms of a relational threat, a relational problem. Somebody doesn't like something you said, and then that's a threat to your relationship, right? Potentially. You might experience a threat in the way of like bad news. And so whenever these threats are experienced, the amygdala, which is the seat of our emotions in our brain, it gets activated and we release cortisol and we release adrenaline and we get ready to fight or to flee or to freeze. And most often we go into that drive system. If we don't regulate our emotions and return to a soothing system, we end up staying in that heightened or chronic state of stress. And I'm sure everybody who's here already knows this because you're here because you value self-compassion and you value your mental and emotional well-being, I'm assuming. But what happens is when we're in that chronic state of stress and we're ping-ponging between threat and drive systems, our cognitive functioning becomes compromised. We tend to be less able to be present for ourselves and for others. And we're at a much higher risk of burnout, apathy, fatigue, and other physical and mental health issues. So it's really important for those of us in stressful, demanding situations, which like is honestly all of us, right? Because just look at the world. So you exist on this planet, so you're already in a stressful environment. And then you're running your own business. So your livelihood is at least partially dependent on that part of your life. It's really important for us to be aware of this default pattern that we're mostly in and to know how to access the soothing system when we need it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the physiology of self-compassion, and this is what's going to give you the tools to help you access the soothing system. Before I go into that, are there any questions about this model, the drive system, threat system, soothing system? Okay. So we're often ping-ponging. We have this mindful awareness now that we are ping-ponging. We know that we need to access the soothing system. We're like, how do I do that? How do I do that? I've never been taught. Maybe I grew up in a family where there wasn't a lot of emotional soothing. What do I do? So lucky for us, all mammals, including humans, have what's called the mammalian caregiving system. And this system is an evolutionarily adaptive trait that allows mammals to support their young in order to feel safe. So if you think of a caregiver responding to a child in distress, let me back up. If you think of an attuned caregiver that is responding to a child in distress, oftentimes what they might do is pick the child up. Maybe if you're thinking of an infant, maybe they're patting the baby's back. Maybe they're rocking, like I just started doing that naturally. They're rocking and they're bouncing, right? Maybe they're cooing or singing a lullaby or shushing, right? These are the actions that we can take that activate the soothing system. If we want to think of maybe like a younger child that comes to an adult who, and they've come from school and they got in a fight with their friend and they come in and they're like, so-and-so was mad at me because of such and such. And the adult responds by saying, oh, honey, oh, that sounds so hard. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That tone of voice that I just took, that's that gentle, soothing tone of voice, right? That activates the soothing system. These types of responses help to calm the nervous system. They release oxytocin and they allow us to feel safe and secure. What I love about this is that we don't need these gestures to come from someone else. We can provide these to ourselves. And so right now, in just a moment, I'm going to take us through a practice that's just going to invite you to connect with some of these soothing gestures. And then I'm going to take us right into a practice that's called self-compassion break. So I know we're doing a lot of like experiential stuff. I'm sort of like talking at you, and then there's experiential. And that's really intentional because self-compassion is really, like, we can talk about it for hours, but it's really most effectively learned when we experience it. And so I'm hoping that through one of these several practices, you're getting a sense, just a little flavor of what self-compassion feels like. Okay, so before we get into the practice, I would like you to make sure you have that pen and paper handy, because I'm going to invite you to jot some notes down after the practice. And I'm going to invite you to get really comfortable. We're going to be in this practice for about 20 minutes. So if you don't have 20 minutes available, this would be a good time for you to step out. We will hate to see you go, but of course, take care of yourself. If you are here for the full time, really make yourself comfortable. You can turn off your camera. You can lie down if that feels nice to you. You can stand up if that feels good to you. You can just stay seated right where you are. So go ahead and settle in. And if it feels okay to do so, please go ahead and close your eyes, either fully or partially, just to help you connect with your inner experience. And maybe taking a couple of nice full breaths. Your brain has just been really busy learning, listening, processing. Just take a couple nice deep breaths to let all of that go. Connect with yourself. Just notice your body. I'm going to offer a few different gestures for you to take, postures for you to take. And I want you to just notice how your body responds. First, I'd like you to take your palms and just press them gently against one another. And I'll be doing these on screen, so if you need a little visual, you're welcome to look. And just notice what that feels like. You know, not all of these will feel soothing to you. So it's helpful to just know what does feel soothing. And now maybe just placing one hand cupped in the other. So one hand beneath the other. You can rest the hands on the lap or hold them in front of your belly. Just notice how that feels. And now maybe placing one hand over the heart. Feeling the weight of your hand on your chest. Maybe feeling the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. Maybe placing the other hand over the heart, two hands over the heart. Again, just noticing how your body naturally responds to these gestures. There's no right or wrong. What you feel right now might be different from what you feel tomorrow. Placing a fist over the heart and then cupping your other hand over the fist. Gently stroking the collarbone area, the chest, back and forth or in small circles. Again, just noticing what happens in your body. Placing one hand over the heart and one hand on top of your abdomen. Placing both hands on the abdomen. Placing one hand on a cheek. Placing the other hand on the other cheek, cradling the face and the hands. Crossing the arms and giving yourself just a gentle hug. Releasing the hug and just gently stroking one of your arms. Finally, gently rocking or swaying, if that's available to you. Now taking a few moments just on your own to return to a few of those gestures that felt supportive to you. So just trying them on for your own self. And when you feel ready, just resting your hands comfortably. Now, keeping your eyes closed or your gaze softened, I'm going to move us right into our self-compassion break exercise. I'd like you to think of a situation in your life right now, current situation, that's difficult. It's causing you stress. Maybe it's a health problem, a problem in an important relationship. Maybe it's a work problem, a stress related to bias or discrimination. But I also want you to check in with yourself and make sure you're choosing something that's relatively mild, maybe moderate, but nothing that's too big. We want to make sure that we're not in a space of overwhelm because we can't actually learn when we're overwhelmed. So choosing a situation that's mild to moderate in terms of distress. I also want to invite you to remember that if you feel overwhelmed at any point during this exercise, you are invited to take care of yourself, offering yourself what you need, maybe opening your eyes, grounding yourself, feeling your feet on the floor, stopping the exercise altogether. or taking a few deep breaths. Remembering that it's more self-compassionate to disengage from an exercise altogether if it's causing you distress than it is to push through. So again, just recalling that mild to moderate situation in your life that's bringing you stress. Allow yourself to drop into the situation and recall how it feels, or remember, like if it's a specific event that happened yesterday, just see if you can remember how you felt at that time. So connecting with the experience. Notice how this distress feels in your body. If you feel like you're kind of lost a little bit, just try to bring the situation back to your mind. And then just check in with your body. See where you can feel the sensation of stress in your body. Now, seeing if you can identify where that tension or stress is the most present, the most evident. Maybe it's your throat, maybe it's your heart, your belly. Allowing your experience to be just as it is. Perhaps making just a little more room than usual for the experience of discomfort in your body. Maybe even try labeling the experience for yourself in a really gentle and kind way. This is uncomfortable. This hurts. This is stressful. This is a moment of suffering. By labeling this experience, you're validating your experience as you might for a good friend. Knowing that what you are experiencing right now is part of the human experience. You're not alone. Others would feel just as you do, or you did, in the same situation. This is part of being a human being. Now let's see if we can respond to the distress in a new way. Can you offer yourself some kindness simply because you're having a moment of discomfort? Perhaps placing a hand on the part of your body that feels the stress the most. If you'd like, maybe sending kindness through your fingers or through the palm of your hand into the part of your body that's holding the stress. Or maybe gently massaging that part of your body. Or consider for a moment what you would most like to hear in a moment like this. Perhaps words of comfort or support. For example, I'm here for you. I love you. You're a good person. What might those words be for you? Can you repeat those words for yourself in your own mind, in your own way? Taking a moment and offering yourself kindness in a way that feels just right for you. Savoring compassionate touch, or offering yourself the words of kindness, not trying to change anything or make anything go away. Now, please begin to release the practice. Letting this practice and this experience settle. Allowing yourself to feel just as you do right now. Letting the exercise be just as it was. And allowing yourself, if only for this moment, to be just as you are. And when you're ready, in your own time, there's no rush. Very slowly and gently opening your eyes. Slowly and gently taking in the room around you. Making your way back to the screen and to each other. So again, taking your time, there's no rush. Go ahead and take a couple minutes to settle and to reflect on that exercise. So if you have that pen and paper handy and you want to just make a couple of notes about what you experienced, this would be the time to do that. Another 30 seconds or so to just jot a few more things down. All right. So, is there anything that anyone would like to share from that practice? There's no requirement, just simply an invitation. If there's anything you notice that you would like to share with the group. Yeah, Kara.
Hi, everybody. There's two things that I jotted down. I think the first was kind of a surprise or a delight that I found in the practice, which was the physicality of it. I wasn't necessarily expecting the physicality of self-compassion to be so like central to the practice. Then the other thing that struck me was, Kristen, at one point you prompted us, you asked a question like, where does stress feel most present? And I immediately thought my stress typically feels most present in my heart. And I thought it was interesting because the physical touch that felt most comforting to me was when we put our two hands over our heart. So I thought it was really interesting that there was that connection. And then it made me think more that in my language also, I'll often, if I'm happy, I'll be like, oh, my heart's so happy. Or if something has been upsetting to me, I'll be like, my heart feels broken. So I just thought the coming out, that thread that ran throughout all of those things was unexpected and interesting.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kara. Thank you. I can share that when I first, in the beginning, when I first started practicing self-compassion, I had a very similar response where I was like, whoa, my body, like there's so much that my body is telling me, and so much that trying to be very intentional with my words here, like the down regulation of the nervous system is real. When you place your hands on the heart and the heart is actually aching, and how that can actually bring soothing to your whole nervous system. It's incredible. It's powerful. And so, yeah, I can relate to, I think different, of course, experiences, but I can relate to what you're saying. And I really appreciate you naming that and sharing that you had that experience of the physicality of this practice. When I so I had the privilege of learning from Dr. Chris Germer, who is one of the two co-creators of this course that I teach. And I was like, I'm feeling this, but I don't know the label for it. And he was like, you don't need a label. If you feel it, the label is unnecessary. The physicality of it is actually primary. And I think that's kind of what you are just highlighting with your share. So thank you. Anything anyone else would like to share?
I would like to share that there are some of the practice. I mean, I fell asleep during the middle of it, so I don't remember the rest, but
Good for you.
I noticed that when I'm laying on the couch at night watching TV that I do some of those practices without noticing. It's like I'll just kind of like, like rub my chest, and sometimes I'll pat my arm, and sometimes I'll be in bed just thinking, and I'll just, put my hand over my forehead. When I do Joe Dispenza meditations, we're encouraged to put both our hands on our hearts. So I've done walking meditations that way. I've done 90-minute meditations that way. I've done 5-minute meditations that way. So it's interesting to notice some of those things I'm naturally doing, and then the other ones are things that I would really like to cultivate. So that was wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much, Sophia. I appreciate that so much. And I love that your body is just knowing what to do. Our bodies know so much. They know so much. Okay, we have time for maybe one more question or comment, and then I'm a resource available to all of you. So if you do have a question that comes up later, you can reach out to me always. I'll say that. But is there anyone else who would like to share?
Well, I can share one, Kristen.
Yeah.
The first thing that I noticed was when I'm comforting a friend, when I'm trying to be compassionate with somebody else, oftentimes I do this. And I'm doing it so that I can like hold it with them. Like I can hold the discomfort of it with them. And so it was interesting to be like, oh, I do that naturally already when it's in service of being able to stay present to other people's experience. Like as a way of staying present to their experience, that's what I'm doing. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing is I absolutely would have fallen asleep if I were not participating in running this. I kept having to kind of open my eyes a little bit because I was worried I was going to like fall asleep. Why I have to do it again when I'm not hosting. But I realized the extent to which I think I rely on my like drive system to be like productive and get things done. I think it may be in part due to some of my neurodivergence, maybe in part just because that's what we all do. But just watching that resistance that I had to being like, oh, but you can't soothe yourself that much because then you're not going to get anything done. So you better wake yourself up, you know, like just that like reaction of wanting to go back into drive.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Brooke, thank you for sharing all of that, and especially that last piece, because I think I think it's been highlighted already with a couple of shares. But yeah, that narrative we have around and that impulse we have to drive to keep going, and then by default end up suppressing what we really need in this way of soothing. And so I love that you're going to come back to this. And if you fall asleep. Yes, great, because that's what's needed, right? Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to fly through our last couple slides here just to be respectful of everybody's time. So I think experiential is the best way to really connect with self-compassion. But if you are wanting to also read, here are the benefits of self-compassion. Over 3,000 peer-reviewed articles show that these things are all proven benefits of self-compassion. So we're building inner strength. We're decreasing depression, anxiety, stress, emotional avoidance. We are improving overall health. We're strengthening personal responsibility, the ability to tolerate our own mistakes. And we are more effectively motivated by self-compassion than criticism, which is a whole other workshop. Self-study. So if you're bought in, you love self-compassion, here are some resources, and I'll send some information to Brooke to send out so that you guys don't have to jot these down. This will all be in an email, but we've got lots of self-study resources. You can get self-compassion coaching if you want ongoing support. You can work with a compassion-oriented therapist if you feel like there's deeper stuff you'd like to dive into. I'm teaching an upcoming mindful self-compassion course. This is the one that I mentioned at the beginning that I took that transformed my life that I am now teaching. It starts February 9th. So it's coming up real soon, but there's still plenty of time to register, and we have scholarships available and sliding scale opportunities for pricing. So feel free to check that out. And last but not least, I just want to say thank you. Thank you again to Brooke. And thank you to each of you for being here. It's not that often that I get the chance to talk with a group of business owners. And I'm just so deeply grateful that you're all here today and that you really like see and feel the value in learning how to be kinder to yourselves. This is how we're going to make change. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you everyone for coming. It was lovely to have you all here. I'm glad that we all took a break together to actually be nice to ourselves, because I know as people who work for ourselves, we're not good at that. Kristen, is it portlandselfcompassion.com? Is that the website that I saw?
Yes, that's the one where you can get more information to register for the course.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Portlandselfcompassion.com if anyone wants to check it out before I post things. This workshop, as well as all the other workshops that we've done, the recordings will be posted in Fruition in the workshops and Q&A space. So if you want to come back to it, it's there. If you want to come back to our others on self-care, we also have one on content strategy, sustainable content strategy. You can go there. Thank you, everybody. It was lovely to see you. Kristen, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.